Hi, it's Sachi, and you're looking at me trying to freeze in the angle I thought I looked best in, and this is my new blouse I made using my basic boxy blouse pattern. I added 2 rectangles to the basic blouse sleeves to get this look. First, print out the pattern on the letter size paper and tape it together. I used hemline B for the slightly cropped look. I folded the pattern at the hemline B, then added about 1 3/4 inch for the hem allowance. So for some reason, when I was making the base pattern, I added 1/2 inch seam allowances to the center front, which is completely unnecessary if you're using it on fold. So align the center front line to the folded line, not the outline of the shaded area, but omit the shaded area. Sorry about the confusion. Do the same thing on the back bodice. Now I'm looking at it, I see what I did wrong there. I forgot to align the pattern center back line to the folded edge. I should just cut off the seam allowance at the center back from the base pattern altogether so I don't make the same mistake. To determine the length of the square, hold up the front pattern with the center front mark on your body's center front and measure this distance. Then add some seam allowances. I ended up cutting rectangles 16 inches by 23 inches because I didn't have a lot of fabric left after cutting out bodice pieces, but the long edge should have been more like 33 inches to 46 inches, so I have enough fabric to gather up. You'll see how I fixed the problem later in this video. From leftover fabric, cut out 2-inch wide bias strips for the neckline. At this point, I was called to make some popcorn for my kids. Now back to my sewing table. First thing to sew are shoulder seams. Sew the shoulders together and overlock the raw edges. If you don't own a serger, you can use zigzag stitch on a regular machine. Bias strips are connected together so it's one long piece long enough to go around the neckline. Align the edges of the neckline and the bias strip as you go, and sew at 1/2 inch from the edge. Stop sewing at a couple inches before the round ends. Make the ends of the bias strips overlap and mark where they need to be connected. Cut off the excess fabric and sew the ends right sides together. Finish attaching the bias strip to the neckline. Trim the seam allowances to about 1/4 inch, then push all the seam allowances and the bias strip to the right, and edge stitch on the bias strip. Mark on the bias strip 5/8 of an inch from the seam and cut on the line. Fold the bias strip over the trimmed seam allowance and fold again to completely encase the raw edges and edge stitch it closed. Iron the neckline to smooth out any wrinkles. When I was ironing here, I was wondering why the back neckline looked so much longer than the front neckline, but now I know it was because I had cut out the back bodice incorrectly. I was going to gather the rectangle to fit the sleeve, but then I realized that the rectangle was only slightly but not much bigger than the lengths of front and back sleeves combined. It should be about twice as long to get nice gathering. So I decided to make the sleeve opening smaller since I didn't have any more fabric to make the rectangles bigger. I made the 2 parallel rows of stitching with the longest stitch length setting available and grabbed only the top threads of both rows to make the gather. Gather up until its length matches the sleeve. Distribute the gather nicely and pin right sides together. When I tried it on, I didn't like where the gathered part was attached, so I decided to move the seam. Note to myself, try on the garment before you overlock the seam because it takes much longer to undo overlocked seams. I decided to put elastics at the sleeve opening. I cut 1/4 inch wide elastic to the size a bit bigger than my wrist and made the casing for the elastic at the sleeve opening. Casing should be a little bit wider than the width of your elastic to allow the fabric to gather up nicely. Here is how it turned out. I made a lot of mistakes making this blouse and it's certainly not my best work, but I think it's wearable and I love how I can push up the sleeves. It's really useful for when I wash dirty dishes or make rice bowls.